We'll remind everybody they're on tape. And we'll ask for a motion to approve January 16th minutes.
Sure, I can make a motion to approve the January 16th minutes.
And I'll make a second to that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye, aye, aye.
Now we need a second motion to approve the minutes from our February 20th special meeting of the HOA chairs.
I'll make that one.
There. Betty was there.
So I move to accept them. They look fine to me.
Betty?
I second that.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So next item, we have Joe Finara, our town engineer here, to present a grant request for part of the Fresh Pond remediation project.
Yes, hello, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
I am pleased to say that the town is advancing their efforts at Fresh Pond and their longer-term remediation project. Last spring, the town had applied for permits and funding to support a pilot-level effort of long-term remediation of Fresh Pond. As you may recall from our previous discussions, back between 2020 and 2022, the town engaged a consulting engineer to analyze and understand what conditions were leading to the degradation of water quality and harmful algal blooms in Fresh Pond. The results of that study showed that there was an excess of phosphorus in the sediment of the pond, and through natural processes, the turnover of the water and release of the chemical phosphorus was acting as a fertilizer of sorts, creating harmful algal blooms, specifically in the late summer and early fall. The project then advanced with this in mind to develop a solution for how to remove said excess phosphorus. That plan is ultimately a hypomagnetic withdrawal process, whereas the phosphorus-rich water from the bottom of the pond will be removed, filtered, and then returned to the surface of the pond so as to, over time, ultimately remove total excess phosphorus in the sediments. That project has been broken into a smaller pilot-level effort. The full long-term phosphorus removal program is expected to take several years at full scale, partially because of the extraction rate that's possible of phosphorus from water, but also because the window throughout the year to remove the phosphorus is somewhat narrow. So in the long-term process of removing all that excess phosphorus, we're only able to effectively do so for a few months of the year. And in the long-term plan, that cycle would recur each year until we have seen the phosphorus reductions that we need to call this complete. So in a pilot level project, we're seeking to install some of the infrastructure that would be needed for the long-term project. That's mostly the intake pipe and electrical supply to run this filtration equipment. But the pilot project is a small scale version of the full scale, so the flow rate is significantly reduced. The pilot project will only process about 7 gallons per minute, something equivalent to like a garden hose in terms of flow rate. The equipment for filtration will not be purchased. It will be rented for a period of about 3 months. So there's no long-term commitment to the filtration equipment. And the purpose of the pilot project is ultimately to run this filtration system and understand how it reacts with the specific chemistry of the pond. It's not to establish whether this process will work or not. It'll ultimately lead to our ability to gauge how long the long-term project would take. If the filtration process shows higher or lower efficiency, we'll have a better gauge as to whether the longer-term project would be maybe a 4-year effort or an 8-year effort. The pilot project itself comes with this a full set of plans, which should have been distributed to the committee with this request. But the pilot project itself is a fully permitted project with New York State DEC. It's also a quasi-funded project with New York State DEC. Ultimately, the reason that I'm before you today is because the town was awarded a $260,000 grant from New York State to perform this pilot level work. The total project cost is estimated to be $325,000. That $260,000 grant is the contributing funds from the state, but the town is obligated to have a 25% match on that component. So the grant is applied for the full scale of the project cost, that's $325,000. 75% of that cost is covered, that's the $260,000 that the state would provide. But the town has to come up with 25% of the total project cost. That's $65,000 in order to advance this effort and to collect the grant money from the state. To that end, the request to the WQI committee is for half of that grant amount. So $65,000 is the town's portion of the project when stacked up with the grant assistance. But the request tonight is for 50% of that $65,000. So specifically $32,500, because the remaining 50% of the town's contribution has been arranged to be covered by the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association. So as I said, the request for this committee is $32,500. If we secure these funds with the support of this committee and ultimately the town board, this project is conceivably shovel-ready, all set to go. It could start as early as this spring. The permits are in hand, the funding is potentially in hand, and the pilot level project could be completed by the end of summer.
And this is all still just for the pilot?
This is all just for the
Even
pilot.
the grant, the
The
$325,000
grant,
grant?
the permits, everything are restricted to the pilot.
So I didn't get, I didn't
Let me
get
just
the-
interject here. Are we going to discuss if the merits of this? I know there's a little bit of time of the essence, but it probably would be good to have a discussion.
Actually, what I was just gonna say pertains to that.
Okay.
I was gonna say, you mentioned that it was distributed to us. The only thing I got was the email.
Oh, okay.
I think, Jessica, did you send?
We
Can you just hit send again?
we could pull it up too, just if you want to share it on the screen,
Because that would help me if I
the
could
drawing package.
see.
Yeah, that's, yep. So page 4 of that plan package is the pilot level, that's it, yep. So if you're looking at the screen, the pilot level plan would house the filtration equipment at the end of Fresh Pond Road. The equipment would come, we would call it on a skid, so it's kind of palletized, containerized type equipment. The intake line, which would be the only component of the pilot level project that would remain and potentially be reused for full scale, extends down at the end of Fresh Pond Road to a floating platform in the center of the pond. The purpose of that is so the intake can be concentrated in the deepest part of the pond, which is where the phosphorus-rich water is. So we're trying to extract the water as close to the bottom of the deepest part of the pond as possible. And the discharge in the pilot program is just essentially out the side of the filtration unit through a small hose that would go into the shallow wetland areas adjacent to Fresh Pond. That would be to the south side of Fresh Pond Road. And if you just go back up just one page, page 3, you'll see in comparison, the full-scale plans would actually house equipment on a small fixed platform. It would be connected to Fresh Pond Road by a small fixed walkway. The intake line would be the same, with the same pickup floating platform in the center. But in the full-scale project, we would introduce a discharge pipe so that the higher flow water wouldn't be running down the wetlands adjacent to Fresh Pond Road, but rather it would be returned directly into the pond. So the full-scale project would have higher flow rates, and we would install a discharge line so the water is returned to a shallower section than the pickup, obviously, but further out into the pond. The fixed platform and walkway would be used in the short term to house the equipment. It would be off limits to the public, but the long-term plan would be to turn that infrastructure over to the town, and it would become an observation deck or a fishing pier, or however the town would see fit. It ultimately could be removed if we wanted, but this would be a small pile-supported walkway, similar to like a catwalk that would lead to like a residential dock. And I think the dimensions of the platform are something like 20 by 20, or about that. I don't recall the exact dimensions, but that gives you a sense of scale as to what we're talking about in terms of infrastructure and equipment.
Joe, what are the 3-month window that they do this, that they'll be doing this?
It's typically in the spring and into the summer, and it's not specifically defined. It's totally weather dependent. The risk of turnover is what mixes the pond. So at the end of the summer, when the temperature starts to cool, the surface waters then become cooler and heavier, and they sink. The sinking of the surface waters is what pushes up the water from the bottom, and then the phosphorus gets distributed. Throughout the winter and the spring, the water is fairly well segregated, and because it's not mixing, it by osmosis and diffusion becomes phosphorus rich at the bottom as the phosphorus leaves the sediment. And so it's fairly well contained. The density of phosphorus is highest in that little pocket of water down at the bottom of the pond. So we're trying to wait for that to stay as long as possible so that the diffusion can make more phosphorus enter that pool of water, but we can't wait too long because then ultimately it turns over and the process starts again.
And this part here, that's like where the road, the actual place where you walk into the water, like that doesn't impede anyone that wants because I see guys come in with boats sometimes and they launch a boat off and they're fishing. Like every time I've been down there, somebody's fishing off a boat.
Yes, I'm always surprised that every time I'm there, somebody's using Fresh Pond, swimming or kayaking or something. It's not assumed to be such an active street, but it is.
It is.
In both circumstances, full pilot and full scale, the fire access lane and the public access lane are maintained. So this would all be adjacent to that access, occupying the southern portion of the road and the shoulder on the southern side of the road.
So there's only one pickup point, or will there be multiple ones in the full?
There's only one pickup point.
Now, if you want to discuss this, I would.
I'll ask you to get a couple things to document for the record, but
I should probably recuse myself.
good time.
For the record, you should state why.
Because I'm part of the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association, and I also live on the pond and swim in the pond and many other things. So,
As they say in Star Trek, you take the con.
of course, be with you.
It's designed, the pilot is designed, and I presume there's an idea of what the full unit would be at this point then. Am I right in thinking that the pilot unit is fully designed at this point, right? I mean, you just said that it was, time it was of the essence. I mean, I presume that the unit is designed, the system.
The filtration system that's coming is off the shelf. So it's not a proprietary filtration unit.
It's on the market, it's been used before.
Yes, it's commercially available for other applications, industrial or wastewater processes, yes.
And who gets to install it? Is that PO's company? Is that, who's going to install the pilot unit?
That would be out to contract, yeah, so Usually in these cases, it's not the designer, but the contract would be with the equipment supplier. Typically, the designer reviews the results, but the installation of this equipment would all be contracted out in accordance with the town's procurement procedures.
Does that impact the time of being of the essence if you have to contract the installation?
It does, but we typically don't offer projects for bid unless the funding is secured. So this is somewhat of a sequential process. Also happening concurrently now is our contract with the state for the grant. So the grant has been awarded, but after the grant award, the town does have to contract with the state to secure the funding and to be sure that, the project is aligned with all of, and the funding mechanism is aligned with the contract terms of the grants. That's standard procedure, but that's also happening now.
And
Do
how-
we expect to get this system in place this year, or is it next year?
We are hoping to do it this year, but if, circumstances do not allow that for any number of reasons, we're prepared to do it next year. Our goal, certainly as a township and in partnership with the Fresh Pond Neighbors, is to do it this year if we can.
And how long does it take to, like, let's just say hypothetically, we approve it, then how long do you anticipate, like, getting some contractor to be able to install this equipment? And like you said, you shop around for somebody to do it?
Yeah, so we would put this out to bid.
What do you think? Like,
The typical bid period is 30 days, so we would advertise that, probably a couple of weeks to get the contract into place. We would hope to start construction, installation here in May, so that we could do June and July as the operating days, operating period, as a minimum. But we are fighting the clock in that regard. It's a pretty tight turnaround. So this committee's review is certainly part of the critical path, but there are other components that are also critical paths that are happening concurrently, and any one of those could, throw the proverbial wrench into the system for this.
but I understand what you're saying, like, getting this grant is contingent on the fact that you have to the town has to come up with the other half. Well,
That's right.
25%. So.
Yeah, so the grant has been awarded, and the contract is not typically an opportunity where the grant falls apart. It's really just an agreement to the state's conditions on the money. So we have done this, several times in the past. That's not typically where the project falls apart. In my experience, it's been that either the project doesn't have public support to advance, and we say thanks, but no thanks for the money opportunity, or that we can't come up with the matching funds, in which case we can't spend any of the money because we have an obligation to match at that ratio.
How well is the Fresh Pond Association doing with, I don't follow their finances, I don't know how are they?
They've committed to the 50%.
They think they can do it?
They did, that's not finalized either. I can't say they have a signed contract, but the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association has participated financially in several other aspects of the project. So they have a track record of contributing funds. And certainly that is the type of relationship that we would memorialize with an agreement, if we were to move forward with the project, certainly if there was this committee's approval.
And who would be doing the operation and the measuring of the product, it's installed?
Right.
Who's then rolling down there once a week or every day? I don't know. And then what are they going to wind up pulling out and measuring so that at the end of this, the town can expect to see, here's what it did.
Right.
Who does that?
The operating of the equipment, that's probably a little bit nuanced as to whose role is what, but ultimately we expect the same contractor who provides the equipment to be the go-to resource for, flipping the switches and actually operating the machinery. The designer, which is Lombardo Associates, would have a role in overseeing the effort from an operational standpoint and results. So they would issue a report both during and after the effort that documents the successes and the fine tuning that would occur between pilot and full scale. So that would be their role. And like I said, that'd likely be separate from the operating of the equipment.
Does the current design, is there a, here's the number that we have to reach in order to say it's been successful? Or you know, if you don't reach that level, do you say, you know, maybe this isn't the right thing to do? Is there?
There are
is there-
targets. We do have specific metrics.
You do,
Yes, I believe the total amount from our initial analysis was about 125 kilograms of phosphorus that are projected to be needed to be removed to call this a success, where we would stop the harmful algal blooms. The pilot project aims to remove it's either 32 or 27 kilos. But that'd be the metric that we're seeking.
that would be available to the town board, should we decide to push this forward.
The metric?
Yeah, the metrics.
Yeah, of course, yeah, it's in some of these documents, the number just eludes me.
It's,
Julia said we-
she sent it again to our inboxes.
Oh, okay.
The emails and.
Well, damn it, all I have is pieces of paper. Do we have an idea of what the full-scale system would be? Is that been, and I don't recall, maybe we talked about this in the past. How much do we think it's going to happen? If it takes 10 years, how big of a chunk of money is that the town board would want to be aware of? I imagine, you know, if it turns out to be $12 million worth of effort, that's probably, maybe you shouldn't spend it on
Sure.
pilot. So
Sure.
Is there a ballpark? I understand it's got to be a ballpark.
Yeah, and there's two key components to that. It's a commitment in cost to install the system, but it's also a commitment to run it for however many years, and it's kind of open-ended, which makes the commitment quite challenging. You say, oh, I want to start this project, might take 6 years, might take 8 years. The operating costs are not wild, but they're not insignificant. You know, it's on a scale of probably $30,000 to $50,000 per year to operate this. So to give you a sense of scale of construction cost, this is $325,000 effort for pilot. Some of this gets rolled over, like we were discussing, the intake infrastructure.
Right.
That's probably, if I'm estimating, about a third of this cost is that infrastructure. And then the cost to build the remaining full-scale project is also in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think it's about another $300,000 or $400,000 the last that I checked. Some of that goes to things like the pier and the platform, which were a way for us to move this effort off of Fresh Pond Road to make somewhat of a less invasive footprint. You know, the filtration would happen off the road, off the right of way, and then it ultimately can get recycled into something useful, like we said, a fishing pier or a scenic overlook or something that could be removed, but that's some value of the project that could help, be offset in the sense that the town gets something at the end of it. That's a sizable cost to the project, is installing that walkway. There's an alternative where that's back in the road, but having worked through this in public conversation, that seemed to be the preferred approach for everyone to have to invest in the pier, for instance.
But you also were saying that we really can't determine how the number of years of the full-scale project until we get the results from this pilot, right? This, like you had said, this pilot is going to somehow narrow it down. Like, is it going to be 4 years, 6 years, 8 years? Right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And that will also help fine tune the equipment and the operating procedure for the full-scale filtration. So we will have a better understanding of how to orient the process at full scale with the data from pilot scale.
And could we also assume that there'd be other grants out there for the larger project? Like, just as we got this one, 325?
Yes.
Like, so it's not gonna be a case of you're gonna come back to WQI for like the whole shebang?
No, that kind of decision is above my pay grade. How the town board and the other stakeholders want to pursue funding this project.
Yeah.
But I could tell you that historically with Fresh Pond, there's been a healthy amount of outside money, be it from Fresh Pond Neighbors or from New York State, Suffolk County, WQ whatever their water quality acronym is. And all of those options would be on the table for reapplication as we advance the different phases of this project.
To see if, I have another couple questions, but
Yeah.
maybe Betty.
Betty, do you have anything you want to question Joe on?
No, not so. I'm keeping track here, but I don't have any outstanding questions.
Where you want to go?
So there is a potential anyway for an additional round of grants when we try and put the whole unit in. Is that,
Absolutely. And potentially, we would have more than one attempt at those grants, depending on how the schedule lays out. For instance, this summer is, in the summertime is typically when the state's funding application cycle opens. It's also when the county does. So potentially you could apply this year while the pilot program has either recently concluded. And if you miss that one, you could potentially do the next summers as well and not have to really miss the step with the long-term, effort at the pond.
is there, with the system, is there, say, does Massachusetts or some other state or somewhere over on the South Shore, say, are they installing, is there knowledge that they may be installing similar systems that our learning could be, we could learn from them as in the future, they could learn from us? Is there
Yes.
anybody else doing the thing this way?
Yes, definitely. Hypolimnetic withdrawal is a common technique. What's unique to our particular application is that we're returning the water, where hypolimnetic withdrawal is used elsewhere in the Northeast. It's typically not in groundwater sourced ponds. If you're familiar with some of the upstate lake arrangements, they often, one lake drains to another lake, to another lake. And so hypolimnetic withdrawal applications in those circumstances typically move the discharge to the lower location because they're connected with drainage. That's the natural flow of the water. We have explored discharge sites elsewhere. We looked at moving the water straight to Menantic or Dickerson Creek or even groundwater discharge. But not only did DEC feel that wasn't necessary, it was more costly. And we had that concept reviewed by a limnologist, Dr. Ken Wagner, who felt that discharging to the pond, given this specific pond's geology and bathymetry, that this would be a totally reasonable approach to help reduce costs. And to that end, I suppose the information received from this project may also help aid subsequent projects of a similar nature where they're trying to maybe do the same kind of arrangement.
Maybe you can get, you'd be the lead developer in a scientific journal.
Maybe we'll be on the cover of
Trophin or,
on Quarterly or something, yeah.
is this the, I remember, does this create that big pile of mush that we had earlier on, or is this a different system? Right, there was,
No, that's the stuff that they cut out of the pond.
that was just,
They were
Vegetation.
removing, that's the removal.
yeah, this is,
The project you may be thinking of was over the summer where we removed the vegetation. So on Fresh Pond Road, there was a contractor who brought a real
It's on
horror
the
movie
site
type
with the
contraction.
thing, yeah.
yeah, okay.
And paddle wheels and cut
It's like paddle
the,
wheels, yeah.
but so that was, so that we dewatered that material on Fresh Pond Road, and that's maybe what you're referring to.
That's exactly what I'm remembering.
And that was a totally different approach, although that approach is used in many other ponds to accomplish the same thing. The concept with that is the vegetation sprouts and uses the nutrients in the sediment for its own for its own growth.
It keeps growing.
Right, so by removing the vegetation before it has a chance to decompose in the pond, you're essentially extracting those nutrients and you're closing the cycle. Fresh pond is quite deep and the vegetation is not widespread because of that. This particular species, can only sprout so far from the bottom, so once the water gets deep, you don't see a lot of vegetation. On the South Fork, there's a couple of places, I think maybe Georgica Pond, if I'm remembering right.
Georgica Pond, yeah.
So it's quite shallow. It has a very similar problem. They're working with Stony Brook University to resolve their nutrient problem. And they took the approach of simply buying that harvesting contraption and they cut the vegetation all summer long. And that's their nutrient extraction procedure, is to just keep removing the weeds, and by every bit of material that they remove, biomass, they're taking that phosphorus and nitrogen out of the water permanently. So that's another technique, but it's all in the same concept of finding a way to take those nutrients out of the pond cycle and break the break the blooms.
If we were to vote to move this forward to the town board, do you know how complicated their approval process might be? Do they have to do like one of those 2 public hearing things or that, or is it just a simple,
It's public hearing. Yeah,
well, let's see.
Or at least one public hearing, right?
I know the answer.
I'll tag in the
Yeah, I was gonna say,
supervisor,
yeah, so we could put this, if you approve to move it to the town board, we could put it on the agenda for Tuesday, which would be my suggestion, to pick it up immediately, so that if the town board decides to move forward with it, we would have to set the public hearing at our March 17th meeting. The public hearing would be on April 7th. If we don't anticipate a huge public outcry against this, we could pass the resolution that night on April 7th, so then you could then move to put out
The bids.
requests for bids. So and then if you've got a 30-day period there, you're in the middle of May before you can select somebody.
Through June.
That's about as tight as we can make it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go, timers of this.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much.
And what you're saying is the document that we just received from, Jessica just sent to our, of course, I don't have it, so I can't look. That has the information on the estimate of the full scale system, so that the town board isn't kind of guessing that it's not going to be $12 million or something.
The cost estimates?
Yeah,
I don't think that the cost estimates are in the drawing package, but there's also an accompanying report which was done as part of the sediment analysis and the pilot and full-scale descriptions. So that likely has that information in it.
Okay.
And it has all the other details about the project. It's more of a written narrative
Okay.
rather than the design document.
so the town board will have that.
Absolutely.
Hearing.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
it's got the science and the reporting from the initial.
So didn't we also apply for a bigger grant to cover the entire project?
We did,
And so we have a cost estimate there
we did.
as well as what the state, this is a state grant we got.
Yes.
What the state came back to us and said,
Yes,
we like the project, however, not the whole project, it's too long. And
Right.
therefore, they suggested that we break it down into a pilot.
Did you hear that, Greg? This was kind of important. Can you say it again, Amber?
but let me clarify
Yeah,
that.
it goes better.
We applied for state funding to do the whole project at once last year. One of the requirements for the funding was that you had to have approved permits. Ironically, it's the same entity, it's New York State DEC that was issuing the funding and the permitting. Our permit status at the time was pending, and it had been pending for several months. The grant deadline was approaching, so we submitted the grant with permits pending, hoping that perhaps the permits would be approved and we could let them know while they're still thinking about it. That didn't happen nonetheless, but the permitting agency suggested that we bifurcate the project into pilot and full scale. So the funding request ultimately was not approved, not because of the merits of the project, but because we didn't have permits in hand, which was a requirement. So the state issued us a pilot permit and expressed their support for the overall project. and said, do the pilot and reapply for the full-scale permit once that is complete, and we'll start the process again. The grant terms cover expenditures over a set period of time. I believe it's 5 years. And so it ultimately would be to our benefit to do the pilot program and sort of knock out that first year and reapply and potentially be able to complete the project at full scale within the 5-year period that the full scale grant would allow. That would allow for more funding to be extended through the life of the project. So it does drag out the ultimate timeline of the project because we've got pilot funding mostly resolved, pilot permitting in hand, but then we're gonna have to go and apply for full-scale permits and full-scale funding. But if it works out, it likely will be better in that way, because we could potentially have grant funding for the full length of the full-scale project as opposed to running the risk of, lack of coverage because it was too long. There's a lot to explain. I hope I'm not getting people's
I get
wires
it.
crossed on all of the moving parts here.
No matter what, it would look better than my notes here.
I don't see any scribble on there, Greg, though.
Oh, no, there's a lot of.
I read
There's a lot of scribbles, you know, it's,
That's on his paper number 2.
Okay.
So that concludes my questions anyway.
Yeah, he
So I
answered
don't
my
know, maybe
questions.
there's somebody else on the,
Betty, you didn't have any questions, right? Or
No, it seems to me that if we don't go ahead with this pilot program, where in essence, there's already been money expended both by our committee and also Friends of Fresh Pond and stuff. And in my opinion, I think it would be in our error if we did not support this project and give the money that they're asking for the grant.
in terms of what we have available, they're only asking 32,500. It's a very modest amount.
that's it, nobody else. Well, Amber, you're here, you could talk if you wanted to. Benjamin?
He can't talk.
I can't
talk?
ask a question?
No, because both liaisons are here and it will go to the town board. If you start asking questions, you've just created a quorum.
Never mind,
Uh,
don't.
Nope,
Bye.
I don't have. Bye.
Okay, do you want to close the hearing? We can have a final conversation and then I'll
Yeah,
try and make a motion.
yeah, all right, so I'd like to make a motion that we close the hearing on the town's request for the 32,500 for the Fresh Pond remediation.
Is that the motion?
Just to close it, the motion to close
Okay.
it.
Okay,
Second?
yes, I'll second.
Okay.
All right, so we're closed now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that means as long as James doesn't come in, if he's able to come back in or not.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, you should, the three of you.
It's best if you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I came up with a bunch of questions
Yeah.
and then I think I've got them all answered. I'd
Same
like to
to me.
try and put at least some of them into the record, but,
But you did in asking the questions.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with the motion, that's correct, yes.
Well, I just did the motion to close the hearing, but you can make the motion if you want to, like, if we're gonna vote on it.
Do we want to vote on it?
I would like to vote on it. I'd
Betty,
like
do you want to vote
get
on this
moving,
now?
yeah.
I think,
Yeah,
Ready
I
for
think
a vote?
Okay, so-
yes, I'm ready for a vote, yes.
Okay.
okay, so,
Do you want to include anything that you want to include?
yeah, so it looks worse this way. Okay, so the WQI is recommending that the WQI fund an amount of 3,025, 3,250 thousand be
32,500.
32, excuse me,
500.
32,500, I see it there. Be committed, be recommended by the WQI for the town board to approve this for the subject project. We are recognizing that the Fresh Pond Association is paying an equivalent amount to go with the grant money that we have from the state for this. This is a pilot effort that will provide all of the information that we think we need to move forward in the future to a full-scale project. We think it's important that, well, we'd like to ask the engineering to make sure that the estimates of installation of this system, of the operating procedures and the estimate size for the full unit be available, so that the town board can understand that. And that's all I have to say. That would.
That was good.
Jessica, that's a kind of a mealy-mouthed, like not real clear. Good luck with it. So I make that motion?
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye,
Aye, Betty?
Aye.
we've moved forward.
Thank you very much.
Can you ask James to come in? All right, that was good. That was good.
Yes, I think so. I think we're doing the right thing.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
So,
Thanks, Joe.
Did you get the conversation that they had day before yesterday at, I think I sent it to the entire WQI.
Well, what happened?
it was approved.
Thank you.
Wait, you can watch the recording if you want.
And now it comes to the horse race to get it available to start pumping water.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
a lot of-
a lot of moving parts here. That's the way things go like this. But at least we have a positive, way to go forward. Okay, so I have one rebate application that we can discuss. That's for the Rosos property at 1 Gardeners Bay Drive.
You want to look at, this is what he's, yeah, this is what he's reading from.
This, yeah.
I don't know, I don't think,
I have an extra thing
No,
here.
I actually,
it's not in the packet, I don't think, but.
I printed it out.
Yeah,
Somebody needs it.
I have one.
It's a request for a,
So, James, can you give us an extra copy?
Yeah.
yeah, this is the one that needs to be signed, so don't
Don't
do anything to it.
Okay.
So they're asking to install a IA system. It doesn't have a shallow drainage field, but it does have leaching galleys, which are shallower units based on water table and such. So they're incrementally better filtering than regular leaching pool. The existing system is over 50 years old. The house was built in the early 70s, maybe 1970. It's very close to the head of Cockles Harbor, which is a very fragile area and susceptible to nitrogen, infusion, which is not a good thing.
It's a it's a surrounding saltwater areas,
Yes.
not.
It's not going to help
Not
with
drinking
drinking water. It's more tidal wetlands that it's going to benefit. Just an aside, I got my long-awaited health department test results
Yeah.
for my water, and it's like 0.01 milligrams of nitrogen in it, But I didn't expect it to be all that much different, I don't think, there. But anyway, but whatever's going from my house is going right into Dickerson Creek, so that should get looked at.
Which Fuji Clean are they doing?
They are doing a
To do-
Fuji Sen 5, I believe it is.
It's not on this copy here.
We just- I might have just omitted it. 7.7, I'm sorry.
Okay, and is that,
That's appropriately sized.
it's appropriate size for the house?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
They don't have a huge load on the houses, not that, there are not that many occupied days, man days in the house. So the nitrogen reduction score is somewhat low. But it is a voluntary change. They don't contemplate any work, with the exception of installing maybe new windows and a new kitchen at some point.
okay, so they have no plans
They
for,
have no plans for something that would create additional density on the property. To that end, I would say that I would recommend its approval with the additional $4,000 to remove the well, because they are not certain. They indicated they don't know at this point about the well.
this is the signature, you probably just want to throw, and put this.
I'll put send 7 on.
It looks
so-
good.
I would ask for a motion to approve this.
I'll make that motion.
And a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Excuse me?
I,
Roses?
Rosas,
What dollar amount?
16,000, 12 base and 4,000 for well replacement. You're welcome. Fuji. Okay. We're good.
You're supposed to say, take the con now.
Take the con, oh, right, yes, Captain.
Because she was the con, and now she's not the con.
Okay, we have, number 5 relates to a grant application that we have received. It's an interesting application. It's a change of existing commercial use, though very light commercial use, to a residential use.
Is that the house on 114? The whole
144
real estate?
Midway.
Oh, Midway.
Well, 114 in Midway, but its address is Midway.
Okay.
That's the old Ketchum building.
The old Georgiana Ketchum, and before that, what's her face? From Shorewood, Gore, Jean Gore. Anyway, so it's an interesting thing. I mean, it's an antiquated, very rudimentary system that's there. The house was done in 1964, I believe. So whatever happens, whatever change, and there's going to be a change to the building, there's going to be a kitchen added and this, that, and the other thing. There's a mandate to put an IA system in. There's an argument from our Shelter Island, the head building inspector, Reed Karen, that he thinks that, that we don't really spell out that we have a criteria for, how we look at these applications, if there were, there's no set thing that says that we view additional bedroom sleeping accommodations as going against the mandate of our legislation, which is to not promote growth. I've checked with 2 engineers, one in the town, one Matt Sherman, and they both agreed that the ultimate result of this project would be to increase the density on the property. So from our usual criteria, it's
No.
it's like, no. However, in this case, it could be argued that this commercial piece of property could be developed into something that was, much, much more than a real estate office. There's a full acre of property that's adjacent to, that's part of this whole property. So, I guess they could put a restaurant there or, something, that might be a greater point source of effluent discharge than a house or the old real estate office. So there's that argument, but that's not what's happening, it seems. So I was wondering, we need to come up with a rationale how this could be approved, if that's our desire. In this particular case, both of the principals of the ownership of this are first responders. So, I mean, I was getting a pretty big push from the building department on this.
So just like, so I'm saying, so this is not being turned back for use of business.
No, it's gonna become a
A
residence,
residence, just a residence.
but it's not changing the zoning.
Right, the zoning, right.
The zoning is still gonna be B,
It's B,
so
I'm sorry.
it's B, it's B.
It's a B,
yeah.
okay.
it's B zone property. So, ultimately, down the road, they, oh, well, maybe we'll build a house on the back piece, and then have this, commercial thing up front. I mean, it's possible. So there's no, and I don't begrudge that at all, of course. But they are a young couple, they want to settle on Shelter Island. There's, an emotional backstory, I guess, which I was not aware of. And we don't really want to get involved in that, but the question became, do we want to perhaps give some extra weight to an applicant who happens to be a first responder? Because, we know that how important those people are to Shelter Island volunteers and whatnot, that, you don't want to have everybody all of a sudden gone and we have to pay for everything that happens. So that's sort of where I was coming from on that.
Have they gone through the process of, it's a change of use?
It's well, I don't know if they've had to apply to, it's a less intense use.
Well, yeah, it's residential. or
I
business.
don't think they need to do that.
There's an established use, and the established use is.
Yeah, but if you're not,
as a
if you've
business.
been given an established use and you choose not to use it, and you just don't use it, you don't have to apply for the downgrade, you just don't use what it's used for. That's my understanding. Does that sound right, Amber? I don't know.
Residential is allowed use in a business zone.
Right, so it can just stay
Residential
residence.
use
Yes,
is allowed use.
Like my daughter's property happens to be commercial and, it's a residential piece, I mean, she uses it as a residence, but it doesn't change the zoning.
Well, it's
Changes-
something
it
to
changes the
think about.
use.
Well,
I mean, if you wanted to go, you're
Yeah,
right,
you mean-
it's, and I don't know whether or
It's got
not you
the
want to call it
potential
a
for something, but it-
downgrading,
yeah.
and I mean, the
I
change.
mean, there's never been a use, like, I don't know, like in this case, it's always been used as commercial,
Yeah,
yes, you're right,
it's not
but
gonna be commercial anymore.
no, it's gonna be, the other allowed use there is residential, so it's not really a change. You're not really, you're just doing another allowable use on B zone.
It's certainly an allowable use, but
Yes.
it's established as,
I don't think you need to go through like a change, like if you were in A and you wanted to put some kind of commercial thing in A, that would be a change of use that you'd need to get town board approval.
I guess
I
my,
don't believe that in this case that the town board has any say in the fact that it's going to be used as a residence or an office.
okay.
It's B already.
If that's the rule here, the change of use was always, in previous lives, in a previous life.
Right, I mean,
That was something that
it usually was
You
more.
might even make a variance, for a change of use
Right, I mean,
from business to, or as
it's usually, well, it's usually the other way around.
There's two types of change of uses. There's a zoning change of use. So this is an allowable zoning use, so there's no change of use required with a zoning change of use application. There's also a change of use if you have a commercial bank and you turn it into a restaurant. That change of use isn't a zoning use, but it does require site plan review. So that may clear up some of the.
And this might,
Okay,
this might be applicable if in our code, residential use was not allowed in B. Then maybe you might have to go to the town board and ask for that,
No, you'd have to go to ZBA.
or ZBA, whoever.
yeah, it would be the
I
ZB.
mean, I thought the change of use, yeah, you're right, ZBA.
So I didn't see this application, but they're intending to fix it up they want to add some more stuff to it? more
Well, I mean,
rooms, or-
there's a bathroom. So if somebody had put a full bath in there like that, like, I don't know, the previous owner might have been thinking along these lines. The previous owner is not Georgiana Ketchum.
Gar.
No. There's somebody between Ketchum and this present owner, I believe. But somebody's done some, you know, I don't think there was a full bathroom in there ever. You know, I think there was a powder room.
But in the past, if somebody's doing something to the home, like they're adding extra bedrooms, or they're adding a couple more bathrooms, or expanding upward or outward, that usually triggers.
Triggers a building
And so-
permit. They have to get a building permit.
So
to do
but
what
is
they're
that
doing.
happening in this case where if we weren't even involved, it would get triggered anyway because they're expanding in such a way that, or is it just like they're gonna fix up some rooms and just, you know, not change, just fix the bathrooms and fix some bedrooms, not add anything to it?
I don't know that, I haven't seen the plan, the actual plan. You know, I just had a dialogue with, you know, I could
But
find
you see
out.
where I'm asking,
Yeah,
is
I-
then
you know.
that would go down one path versus if they're just, you know, fixing things up and doing some remodeling or whatever.
Right, I mean, they're adding a kitchen and a laundry, which were never there. I mean, that's something that they're adding, whether they're staying within the footprint, which is probably your question. I don't know, I could find that out. I don't know that there's no answer, I don't think, that we can come up with at this very moment.
No, but I think we need to see the plans and before we could even, you know. But I get what you're saying, it's the concept of if somebody is a first responder and they're doing some things like this to a house where, you know, they've got to make it habitable with an office. They got to put, you know, they have to make it habitable to become now a residence instead of a
Right,
business.
there was some,
Should we give them?
there was some mandate that they had to put an IA system in. One of my friends had looked at this house, you know, as a possible place. And for some reason, they chose not to, but there was I think there was a mandate to have to put an IA system in when they were looking at it. And I'm not sure where that came from, you know, whether it came from the building department or what. I'm not sure. I can find out more about it.
Also, did they
But
look
it's obviously, that system is certainly not geared to handle a residential load based on its age.
But did they look into the condition of the stuff? Because that's not.
I don't know, I think they would have to have it
Something.
certified, you know, if they were gonna probably change it. And then probably the certification would have shown that it's a block pool and
Yeah.
not in good shape.
So at this point, the Suffolk County, we haven't, was Suffolk County was mandating an upgrade?
There was, the realtor said it was mandated that they had to have an IA system in it.
But how do we know
That's-
that that's accurate? I mean,
That the
Well,
county,
they are, the building department is saying that they are,
Reed
they
saying that?
need one.
from.
But their point of view is that it's not, it should be eligible for a grant. But I don't know.
can I see the plans if I can?
Yeah, I think we could get the plans and look at it
But-
a little bit more in depth.
I have a question. If it's mandated, aren't we prohibited from giving them funding?
Well,
Whether,
that's what our code says that,
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
you know, but that was the whole point, you know, the whole point of this conversation is, do we want to make some exceptions for, you know, these first responder type individuals?
I think that's a slippery slope.
It could be, or it could be an incentive.
we are looking to get.
We don't want to lose these people. You know, and
Is
I'm
there
not saying
something that
that
has to
this is, excuse me?
Is there something that has to be in our rules before we can do that? Does this have to go before the town
We
board
have to
and say,
recommend to the
hey,
town board that we think it's a great idea to extend, change the criteria that would allow, even in a mandated situation, a first responder to be eligible for a town grant. They're eligible for the
Police.
state and the county grants. In this case. Because it's a
Okay,
residential.
wait, how about, so how about, I like a real example to think this through. So let's say hypothetically, not this old real estate building in a B zone. Let's
Right.
just say a first responder and his 6 kids and his spouse, okay? They inherit grandma's two-bedroom little cottage, not by the water, but somewhere in the middle of town. And they don't have enough space. They've now inherited this house and they want to expand because they have too
they've been
many,
renting.
they don't have, and they have too many people that need to be, have bedrooms. If they went to go build something with extra bedrooms, they would be prohibited from getting our grant,
Or normal,
our normal, right? So I think that's a better example than this just happens.
right, it just happens to be a B.
But let's just take that out of it and say, okay, if somebody inherits a house and they're a first responder and then we want them to stay here and they want to expand the house because they just need more quarters, do we say, there is an incentive maybe to have them, be able
Right,
to do
okay,
it?
that's a good
Maybe.
example.
Yeah, you follow what I'm saying, Greg?
I think so.
Yeah.
Amber has said that the supervisors are meeting this week, next week,
Is
tomorrow.
that something you could maybe bring up?
And they're meeting for the purpose of establishing the committee that you're so enamored with.
Oh,
The one that answers all the big questions.
like the new group that they're forming, remember?
The committee of, how many people did you?
The committee of 14, okay.
Right.
So that's where I got 14 from.
Okay, it's 11.
Well, that's
Sorry to
legislation,
disappoint
I
you,
think it
Greg.
said 14, that's why I said that. But maybe I was adding the lawyers.
Right, yeah. Don't add the lawyers.
Yeah, so,
So, I mean, it could be a question that we put to this committee
yeah.
as their first question, maybe.
Yes, but then it won't be established tomorrow.
No, we
We're
get
just
that.
talking about who should be on it. It's the advisory committee, the Peconic Bay Region Advisory Committee.
And it's really comes down to our interpretation of the code. We have, I guess, and I don't have our code with me here, but there were 3 reasons that it was, if this happened, it was mandated, we couldn't pay. And if that happened, the mandated couldn't occur. So it's almost like what you're suggesting, I think, is that that given that this is a 2 first responders, and given that it is not we're not adding space to the building, then.
Well, we'll
wanna
determine
see-
that. We want to see that, I mean,
Yes,
We don't know that. We actually
I'm
don't
just
know
thinking
that.
here,
But we
thinking out
don't know
loud.
that.
we're not changing it into a 5-bedroom home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that the requirement that we have, whether it's whatever C, but whatever C was, which the whole mandate point came in, saying that we would, based on situations in terms of what the usage was gonna be or construction, that we would either be allowed to say at this point, it doesn't exactly pass that muster,
Right.
but given the circumstances, we would recommend that the town board
Consider that as a
consider that as a.
criteria.
There's a word for it, extenuating circumstance, or what the hell it is. But looking at the plan makes sense before we would consider.
I mean, I guess that you could make an exception just as an exception based on that criteria that we came up with, and then the town board can do as they want with it without changing the code, maybe. Maybe that's the way to go, and just say, okay, here's, we're making an exception because of this.
Yes.
Sort of like Darren Binder got some extra consideration when he was doing the cottages,
In effect, I guess, we're saying we're gonna grant a variance in this situation. We would,
Right.
and that variance.
And we
would be-
feel that it's because of,
Because we want to get the unit in the ground here and,
we want these people to stay here.
Special circumstances of having 2 first responders and,
Well, let's
think
flesh
about
this
it.
out
Yeah.
so we can cross all the Ts and dot the Is and make sure that it is what we think it is.
Makes sense to me.
And then we'll revisit it next month.
Okay, that sounds good.
And anything I get in the interim, I'll send to you. Very good. Okay, just to follow up on the HOA info session. Sorry, I got messed up on your attendance.
Okay, I did let you know ahead of time.
Whatever. Anyway, I think it worked out pretty well. We got a little press. I have to correct a couple of Julie's things in her article. But essentially it was good, and so it was, and it elicited, I had a meeting with one of the HOA chairs, and happens to be the Silver Beach person. And, he came to me with, a number of possible projects. So I think from that end, I'd say, I guess it was successful because, one of his questions was about water testing. I said, well, while it's not precedent setting, it doesn't seem to have traction at the town board level at this point of paying for a water test.
Yeah, now that the committee of 14 would make that decision.
We could have that,
Because
we can
the
just pile on stuff to give them.
The old law said, no, you don't use this money for testing.
Even if the testing, the way you would argue, I don't want to get into all that particular
Let's not
argument.
do that again.
But yeah, we should let
We already argued that before.
Carol Karasek have some time.
Well, she's gonna be, she's there, don't worry. In any case, then there was they have this tidal wetlands,
Oh, that's what.
kind of enclosed brackish pond thing that, has, it's in reasonable shape. It has aesthetically beautiful, unhardened shoreline to West Neck Harbor. But it needs to be opened up to get additional flushing to keep it as a vibrant thing, as opposed to being stagnant. I think there's some nearby neighbors that will kick in something, so they may come to us. They may come to us for some funding to do this. I said, well, if you have a proposal, put it together and we can.
I can add that we did apply for a small grant for that, so we actually have some stuff written up, yeah. But I know why it was rejected, so
Right.
that's, you easily fixed it, so.
Right, anyway, so that's something that will, hopefully other people will reach out to us with their, particular community issues. But that's we want to encourage that participation like that. It's great. Then we have Ms. Karasek, as you recall, she lives at the end of Peconic Avenue in Silver Beach, had come to us, I think it was 2001 or 2, that 2021 or 22, sorry. And we had approved a $6,000 grant, I believe. And she had a very extenuating circumstance. And there was a couple of relocation things that were going on. And, it turned out to be a very much more expensive project than, anticipated.
Was it voluntary?
It was a voluntary thing, yes. We had said along the way, after we passed our new base grant rate, that we might reconsider people who had $6,000 grants, if they had bona fide reasons for getting additional funding. And we, at the October meeting, was it? I think September or October, we recommended the town board an additional $6,000. I didn't realize it, but it was not approved by the town board. And, I just sort of found out that just recently. And I guess at the very least, I don't need, I'm sure there are reasons, but you know, at very least, it would be good to have some line of communication to say when a grant is rejected and for what reason, so that we know, and we can communicate to the, you know, applicant. And so I guess I put it in your court.
What was the specifics of this grant? I don't,
Well, she received a grant for an IA system in 2021.
It was
And it was a $6,000 version of the grant.
It did get taken up to 8,000 because that's what 8,000 was paid out.
Okay, all right, so,
Well, got added on for 2,000.
Right. so we, you know, recommended to the town board that based on the fact that she had the older grant amount and the fact that the cost, it was excessive for getting the well and the whole health department thing squared away, that we would increase her grant to 8,000. You know, when we first had this discussions about things like this, you know, we said, oh, well, maybe we'd make them whole to the degree of the base grant amount, which would have, in this case, been 6,000. But I guess we did add the well in, as I recall. And so I'm not sure, you know, if there was a rationale why it was rejected.
This was a request that we sent to.
We recommended to the town that we increase, you know, give her an additional $8,000.
An additional 8,000.
Right.
But she did get the 6,000 and she got the 4,000 for the well,
No, she got
like back.
2,000 because that's what it was back then. So it was 6,000 base grant, 2,000 for.
Well, so we gave her the extra
That's
for
where
the
we got the
well and
8,000.
we filled in the base grant. That's how we
Okay.
arrived at that.
And then we asked for another 8,000.
Right, so to bring that 6,000 grant to 12,000 and the 2,000 well to 4,000 is what we had recommended.
Yeah, and I unfortunately,
this is the grandstand issue.
no,
No,
this was Grasset just asking for additional. We had taken people who had not yet done their installations yet. And so we took people at the old level up to the new level. So there was a slew of those that we had taken care of. But then this was somebody who closed out their grant in 2021, but it was a very expensive project. I think the total cost that we had reported on town paper was 58,000. So what I have in this, our spreadsheet is they got 8,000 from the town, 15,000 from the county, and 10,000 from the state. So they were still shy, what is that, 25, 30?
Well, she's out of pocket here, it says 27,372.
Well, that's what I have in my notes, and I didn't, I only saw realized on the agenda what this was and started researching it just before the meeting, so I didn't go back, I'd like to go back to the, October 22nd town board work session.
Okay.
Because my notes say, put this on hold, and how many people could conceivably come back. So but I don't, that's what my note says, so I don't know whether or not that was an open item to be researched, or if we concluded on it, so that's what I'd like to go back to the tape.
Yeah. All right.
Review.
I mean, yeah, I just, you know, it almost sort of got lost except for Mrs. Karasek didn't get the money.
Right,
So-
yeah, so.
And I thought, oh, yeah, I think you'll get the money. And then she said, well, I never got it. And I said, well, it must be.
If this helps you all, I found a really good email that like summarizes everything about the application. It's got her final invoice on it. Jill, should I just email that back all to you? I just pulled it
Sure.
up. Okay.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, because I.
Just has everything on it,
I
so.
my spreadsheet, so I actually need to work less on if it was in fact hold, how many people could potentially come back, then Jess and I need to do some slicing and dicing on the spreadsheet.
Ms. Karasek happens to be present. Do you want to say anything? She muted.
Carol?
Oh, she just muted.
Yes, thank you. The numbers that our supervisor related, that I received 8,000 and that I was by the committee approved for an additional amount, the additional amount was not known to me. Those numbers are correct. I received 8,000 and from the county and from the state. I received the amounts that you named. My overall application for the entire cost included some re-engineering and some resurvey work for the health department. And my total cost was just under $60,000 for the project. It's about 59 something or other. So I think my out-of-pocket was the 59 less the 10, less the 8, less the 15.
It has here that she was out of pocket 27,372. If that sounds roughly.
Vice President for a voluntary thing.
Sent the email to.
Well, so from my understanding, the town board will look back into it and we will respond to you.
I appreciate that.
Sorry for the mix-up.
Thanks for your help.
You're welcome. Financial report, it's attached to some of the minutes. It's here.
It's on the back page.
On something. Really. Anyway, we gained some money over the. Where'd it go?
I'll just take that.
Oh, well, here, I got
I committed the numbers
Okay, you just-
to memory.
memory. Oh, well, why don't you report on it then, Greg?
I lied.
Well, our unencumbered balance is $3,092,317. So I guess that reflects that last quarter of,
It's the January 31st numbers, which I believe has December in it. It's got January and yes, just January.
so that's why we had that meeting with the HOAs to encourage people to partake of the money for bona fide improvement projects. So I told Doug when I met him, I said, put this out to your, co-chairs of other, communities to, really take us up on it and think about what their needs could be. Because, whether, and I said also, I encouraged him to encourage their, in Doug's case, at least, to encourage his constituents to think about the IAs and.
Well, we talked about doing blocks maybe of people.
Right. So, he said he would redouble his effort. I mean, especially on the interior parcels that are on the water, on the creeks and the harbor and such. So, yeah, so that was good. Any other old business that anybody would like to?
I have something new, but.
How about some new business?
New business, just as a heads up, I looked through the March 4 town board meeting.
I saw that.
Where Joe Fenora made a presentation on the wastewater and water treatment.
The
These
town
buildings
buildings.
were under the gun by the county. And Joe really, it was really good explanation of some of the issues that he has. And there's, when monies comes needed, I have a feeling
Somebody will be here.
some of it at least will come this way. And they need to,
Is there a grant available for that other than from here?
We have, potentially, depending on what happens at the federal government level, we have $1.25 million. That covers 80% of the cost, so depending on what we do. Joe, if we did everything that was on Joe's list, we'd spend $1 million, so we would need $200,000 to cover our share of it.
You have a direct line to Washington now, right?
Well, it's an EPA grant, we're just waiting to see what happens, and so, Lee Zeldin was appointed the head of the
Yeah.
EPA, so I would definitely be reaching out
That's
to
what I
him
mean.
if things go awry. But first we have to see if, like, what the funding stays.
Well, there's a lot of work, I think, to be done now in terms of what he thinks he can see it. That it looked like, the buildings down far, when they can be grouped together.
Right.
But, he's got a piece of work to do.
It would be great to get it done. I understand, them trying to get a long-range plan and something that you're not gonna waste money doing now. But it would be great from our point of view, to see something happen here, because I think it could only help. Finally, okay, I guess we should do it then. Finally the town did it. I guess it's okay.
It sounded like, if I understood the way he was talking, that, as long as they can see stuff moving forward, which would be like the police station, say, okay, so then whatever would happen here, you have a little bit more time to think about what is it.
Right.
So, but sometime in the future,
Good faith.
things could happen.
Any other new business? Then I would ask for your favorite motion.
Make a motion, we close the meeting.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Tui wasn't here.